Vietnam rolled out the red carpet for Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday in the capital, Hanoi. During the visit, now seen as a show of defiance to the West, Putin said he wants to build a, quote, reliable security architecture in the Asia-Pacific region. The two countries signed multiple agreements on issues including energy, although none of the 11 pacts were on the same level as the mutual defense agreement Russia signed with North Korea the day before. Vietnam's President To Lam said Vietnam will always consider Russia as one of its most important partners, and that Putin had contributed to peace and stability in the world. Russia's TASS news agency quoted Putin as saying the two countries shared an interest in, quote, developing a reliable security architecture in the region. During a news conference, he accused the NATO military alliance of creating a security threat for Russia in Asia. We see what is happening in Asia. A bloc system is being put together. NATO is already moving there, to Asia, as if to a permanent place of residence, he said. The U.S. and its allies have criticized Putin's visit, saying he should not be given a stage on which to defend Russia's war in Ukraine. The Russian leader has an outstanding international criminal court warrant over alleged war crimes in Ukraine, which he denies. Neither Russia nor Vietnam are members of the court. The U.S. is Vietnam's top export market and upgraded diplomatic relations with the country last year. For its part, the U.S. State Department said a top diplomat will visit Vietnam this week to stress Washington's commitment to working with Hanoi.
Donald Trump's presidential campaign and his Republican Party last month narrowed a gap in fundraising with President Joe Biden's own re-election effort. Financial disclosures to the Federal Election Commission on Thursday showed Trump had $116 million in the bank at the end of May, more than double what the campaign had a month earlier. Meanwhile, the Republican Party, which is raising money together with Trump, stood at $54 million in cash. Together, they're still roughly $40 million short of the $212 million war chest that Biden and the Democratic Party reported. However, that gap had narrowed by a third since April. That's because Trump's fundraising has surged since then, including during the weeks leading up to his conviction in late May over a hush money payment he made to a porn star. Both camps are also ramping up fundraising from billionaires who are allowed to give unlimited sums to groups allied to the campaigns known as super PACs. A separate filing on Thursday showed conservative billionaire Timothy Mellon gave $50 million last month to a pro-Trump super PAC known as MAGA Inc. On Biden's side, billionaire Mike Bloomberg has given nearly $20 million to two super PACs backing the president's re-election effort, according to sources familiar with the matter.
Here's what's been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. South African logistics utility Transnet has said it will appeal a court decision to award Sasol and Total Energies around 6.2 billion rand, or $344 million in damages and interest to settle a tariff dispute. Sasol said on Thursday it had won the award in a High Court ruling against Transnet, which it accused of overcharging for transporting crude oil for several years. Ghana has reached an agreement in principle with its bondholders for the restructuring of $13 billion worth of international debt, three sources have said. The West African gold and cocoa producer defaulted on most of its $30 billion in external debt in 2022, under the strain of factors including the global health crisis and the war in Ukraine. China's nickel giant Tsingshan Holding Group has started production at its $1 billion steel plant in central Zimbabwe, a company official said on Thursday. Dinson Iron and Steel Company will produce 600,000 metric tons of carbon steel annually during the first phase of its operations, Project Director Wilfred Motzi told reporters during a tour of the plant. Nigerian energy firm ITO said on Wednesday that it had shut down all oil production at its Nembe Creek facility, nearly 50,000 barrels per day of output, after detecting a leak. Oil spills in the Niger Delta have had a catastrophic impact on communities where people have no other water supply than creeks and rely on farming and fishing. And finally, Africa's hopes of meeting United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 are all but dead, a report by Sudanese British billionaire businessman Mo Ibrahim's foundation has said. That's amid an annual funding shortfall of around $1.3 trillion. The study highlights the need for radical changes in financing and how African leaders can band together to represent the continent's needs to other world leaders, with Ibrahim saying Africa has no voice in the global arena.
I used to think she was as beautiful as the moon, Walaa Akel says of her 10-year-old daughter, and that there was no one in the world more beautiful. The disfiguring facial burns of Hanan Akel show how Israel's deadly military campaign in Gaza is also inflicting terrible injuries on Palestinians young and old. Hanan was out walking in Al Bureij refugee camp, where the family had taken shelter, and was caught in Israeli shell fire, her mother says. She has spent the Eid al-Adha festival here at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, being treated for second and third degree burns.
This is not Eid. I would be playing with my friends. I would be happy. I would be playing on the swing. But I went to Al Bureij. It was my destiny.
Her mother Walaa says Hanan keeps wanting to look at videos and pictures of how her face looked before.
I want my face to go back to how it was. I want to walk. I wish I could play again with my friends and my siblings. I miss my siblings.
Hanan's plight also shows the dire condition of Gaza's damaged, under-equipped and understaffed hospitals 8 months into the war. Dr. Mahmoud Mahani, the plastic surgeon treating Hanan, said she has 35% burns and needs urgent care somewhere with more advanced equipment. Walaa says Hanan wants her to brush her hair, but it would hurt her and she can't. It hurts her to eat, to speak, and when her mother tends to her burns.
We keep thinking, what can we do for this girl? After the war, how will she be? How will she get up? She keeps asking, Mama, can you take photos of my face? I want to see my face.
Israel's military response to the October 7th deadly Hamas raids has left tens of thousands dead and wounded across Gaza, according to Palestinian health authorities. But since Israel expanded its offensive last month to include the southern city of Rafah, the border with Egypt has been closed, and Gazans have been unable to go abroad for medical help.
Zhang Junying, a corn farmer in China's Shandong province, was moved to tears on Thursday as she realised her fields are now barren and destroyed. She, alongside many other farmers in the province's capital, Jinan, have found themselves facing ruin as drought and a heatwave have seized northern China.
I hope that the government can reduce the burden on farmers. It would be best if water could be supplied to farmers. This is the voice coming from a farmer's heart. It's a difficult thing for us to say.
Weeks of scarce rainfall and blistering heat have wrung this part of China dry. Shandong among them, a major agricultural province with over 7 million acres of corn planted this season alone, according to local media. Despite repairing wells and switching up planting schedules, some farmers feel helpless in the face of the crisis, including Wan Tuiping.
The drought is very severe. It hasn't rained for more than 2 months. There was no water in the river. I can only mix pesticide with tap water.
On Wednesday, the authorities in Shandong issued a heat alert, warning temperatures could reach up to nearly 40 degrees. Parts of Hebei, Henan and Shandong, around and south of the capital Beijing, could see temperatures hitting 44 degrees, potentially breaking historical records for the month of June, Chinese state broadcaster CCTV reported.
The African vaccine manufacturing industry is expected to supply over 60% of the total vaccine doses required on the continent by 2040. That's according to French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday. He was speaking at the Global Forum for Vaccine Sovereignty and Innovation in Paris as part of World Immunization Week.
Africa manufactures only 2% of the vaccines that it uses, and the aim that we have set for ourselves is that by 2040, 60% of vaccines are manufactured on the continent. So France and Europe have been supporting this initiative since 2021 with 1.3 billion euros, but we can do more.
A funded $1 billion scheme to boost vaccine production in Africa will be launched during the meeting. The scheme aims to address the inequality in access to vaccines that plagued the continent during the global health crisis.
And simply put, when the richest countries were hit by the pandemic, they gave priority to their own population and they forgot about that solidarity. And even though mechanisms were put in place, and had we not done that, the situation would have been a lot worse. But we saw those limitations.
The scheme will also use domestically produced shots to tackle diseases that kill hundreds of thousands of African children every year, such as cholera.
Like you, I was incredibly angry to learn of these allegations. It's a really serious matter. It's right that they're being investigated properly by the relevant law enforcement authorities, including, as Fiona said, a criminal investigation by the police. I want to be crystal clear that if anyone has broken the rules, they should face the full force of the law, and that's what those investigations are there to do, and I hope that they do their work as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. But what I can tell you is if anyone is found to have broken the rules, not only should they face the full consequences of the law, I will make sure that they are booted out of the Conservative Party.
The people of the region and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza.
Huawei says it has made breakthroughs in a number of fields, including artificial intelligence and operating systems. The Chinese tech giant made the claim Friday. It also said it had taken the company just 10 years to do what the US and Europe took 30 years to achieve. The chairman of Huawei's consumer business group, Richard Yu, was speaking at a 3-day event for developers in China. He said the company's Harmony operating system was now available on more than 900 million devices and had made major breakthroughs. He added Huawei's AI infrastructure was now the second most popular after Nvidia. Yu said operating systems and other software had been dominated by Europe and the US for years, but he believes Huawei has an opportunity to overtake them. Data showed the firm's Harmony OS phone operating system passed Apple's iOS in the first quarter of this year. That saw it become the second best-selling mobile operating system in China behind Android with a 17% market share.
NVIDIA just became the world's most valuable company, and it's one of the 6 US firms worth over $1 trillion. The $1 trillion club has expanded quickly since it started 6 years ago, so naturally investors are turning to which companies will join next. 2 firms stick out, Broadcom and Eli Lilly, but perhaps the market's getting ahead of itself. It's notable that all US members of the 4 Comma Club, besides NVIDIA, there's Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon.com, Meta Platforms, have an AI tailwind. Broadcom does as well. The $840 billion chip maker, among other things, makes custom chips used by tech giants to run trained AI programs on, and the company's shares have returned over 3,000% in the past decade, thanks to boss Hock Tan's history of buying smaller firms, cutting costs, and raising prices. Lilly's the other contender, thanks to a different megatrend, treating obesity. It and rival Novo Nordisk control the market for these drugs, and the only limit on growth for the next few years is how fast they can ramp up production. The market for annual sales could exceed $100 billion a year by 2030, estimates Goldman Sachs. Yet megatrend investing obsession with financial figures is often associated with bubbly markets. Remember fiber optics and Dow 10,000 hats in 1999? Both companies' valuations also look extremely optimistic. Eli Lilly is valued at 18 times estimated revenue for next year. That's 3 times as high as rival Merck. Obesity is such a huge winner, moreover, that most big rivals are trying to develop competing better drugs, and drugs eventually lose patent protection. As for Broadcom, it trades at 32 times estimated earnings. That's twice its average over the past 10 years. Most of the revenue growth comes from software acquisitions rather than chips. And companies that rely on acquisitions and cost-cutting often perform poorly if they grow too big. Just look at Kraft Heinz's stock performance over the past decade. The admissions committee for the $1 trillion club is accepting new members, but its standards are starting to look rather indulgent.
Eurozone business growth slowed sharply in June. A key survey showed Friday demand fell for the first time since February. with the block's services industry showing some signs of weakening, while the downturn in manufacturing also worsened. The Composite Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, sank to 50.8 this month from May's 52.2. Analysts were left surprised as they had expected the number to rise, though the index did at least hold above the 50 level, separating growth from contraction for a fourth month. Friday's disappointing number comes despite the European Central Bank delivering interest rate cuts earlier this month. June's data also showed inflationary pressures easing, strengthening the case for further reductions this year. The PMI for the currency union's dominant services industry fell to 52.6, below analyst forecasts. Manufacturing activity has been in decline for almost 2 years and reversed recent signs of a potential recovery. The factory PMI dropped to a 6th-month low of 45.6 from 47.3.
Wall Street's main indexes ended mixed on Thursday as market bellwether Nvidia gave up early gains and investors evaluated the latest economic data. The Dow added more than 0.75%. The S&P 500 shed 0.25% after hitting a record high early in the session, and the Nasdaq lost about 0.8%. Data on Thursday showed the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits fell last week, but the overall number of people on unemployment reached the highest level since January, a sign that the job market continues to cool. Another set of data showed single-family home building fell in May amid continued high mortgage rates. But those rates should ease and spur more activity in the sector, says Liz Miller, president of Summit Place Financial Advisors.
Remember, we are 4.5 million housing units underbuilt in the United States. The demand for construction is incredible. And on the same day we had that housing report that says new permits are weak, we also had KB Homes coming out with an incredible quarter, one of the top builders in the nation. And their new housing contracts, were pretty healthy in the quarter.
Stocks on the move included AI darling Nvidia, which dropped 3.5% after rising earlier in the session. The chipmaker dethroned Microsoft on Tuesday to become the most valuable public company. Shares of Dell and Supermicro Computer also declined after initial moves higher, following news that they received server orders for Elon Musk's AI startup. Shares of Kroger fell more than 3% after striking a cautious tone on near-term consumer spending as it reaffirmed its full-year same-store sales and profit forecasts despite topping first-quarter estimates. And Trump Media and Technology Group shares tumbled 14.5% after the SEC cleared the way for the former president's namesake company to issue more shares, potentially diluting the value of the stock.
Sales of new battery electric cars in the EU dropped sharply in May. They were down 12% from a year before, led by a 30% plunge in Germany. That's according to data released Thursday by Europe's auto industry body. The market share of fully electric cars fell to 12.5%, down from a year ago. However, electrified vehicles as a whole, including hybrids, made up just under half of all new EU passenger car registrations in May, slightly up from a year before. Overall new car sales in the EU fell 3% in May from a year before. Demand for EVs in Europe has cooled in recent months after rising strongly for several years. Competition to produce more affordable models has also grown. Last week, the European Commission said it would impose tariffs of up to 38.1% on China-made EVs from July. It's aimed at protecting domestic automakers from an influx of cheap EV imports. Tesla said last week it expected to raise the price of its China-made Model 3 due to the EU measures. Elon Musk's company recorded a drop of more than a third in May sales in the EU.
Boeing is closing in on a deal to buy back Spirit Aerosystems, a former subsidiary that plays a big role in making its jets. The US aerospace giant wants to take it back as part of moves to improve quality control. The firm has been in the spotlight since a mid-air blowout on one of its 737 MAX jets revived concerns over the safety of its planes. Reaching agreement with arch-rival Airbus had been the big problem. The European company didn't want Boeing owning factories that make major parts for some of its latest aircraft. However, sources say talks have made good progress, with a deal now seen possible before Airbus posts mid-year earnings in July. That could see it take control of key plants in North Carolina and Northern Ireland. Boeing spun off Spirit back in 2005. Now the exact timing of a buyback deal is unclear, though the sources said it could come within weeks. Besides the quality concerns, Boeing has also become worried about Spirit's financial condition. It posted a net loss of $617 million in the first quarter and burned through $444 million in cash, far more than analysts expected. There was no comment from Boeing on the latest reports, while Airbus would only say that discussions were taking place.
The Bank of England kept its main interest rate unchanged on Thursday. It stays at a 16-year high of 5.25% ahead of an election on July 4th. But some policymakers said their decision not to cut was now finally balanced. The central bank's main committee voted 7-2 to keep rates on hold. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said it was good news the latest data had shown inflation was back at its 2% target. But he reiterated it was too soon to cut rates as the bank needed to make sure inflation will stay low. The bank said indicators of inflation persistence, mainly wage growth and services inflation, had moderated since its May meeting but remained high. Big services price inflation and rapid wage growth also meant it was too soon to cut rates for some on the bank's voting committee. Markets have heavily priced in a first quarter-point cut by September's meeting. Any cut is likely to be too late for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. His Conservative Party is around 20 points behind the opposition Labour Party in the pre-election polls. Sunak has sought credit for the fall in inflation since he took office in October 2 years ago, when inflation was at a 41-year high of 11.1%. The Labour blames high mortgage rates on economic mismanagement by the Conservatives' previous leader, Liz Truss. The central bank said the upcoming election had no impact on its decision.
There's been so many exhibitions about fashion designers and fashion photographers, but the model is often left out of the story. And Naomi Campbell's remarkable 40-year career is really kind of, I think, proving that she's an exemplar in the field, because not only is she working with the best designers and photographers, magazines in the industry, but also she uses her platform to spotlight the careers of emerging creatives as well.
It's timeless because of, I think it's about self-love and it's about inclusion, and I think that everyone can resonate with that story, and I think you put the movie on and you just feel good, you know? So I think that's why, like, it's always a movie I would watch with my girls at sleepovers, and like I will continue to do that, you know, and I just think that that's why it kind of hits home with everyone.
What can you expect from Mean Girls in London 2024? A fantastic day or evening out.
She's been involved really intensely from the very beginning. It was amazing when she first came in. I mean, I was completely starstruck. It's Tina Fey. The novelty of working with her will never wear off. But being able to sort of see her mind work and watch her scribble things down. I mean, she has about 50 different punchlines for each section of the show at her disposal, like ready to go. She's just a genius.
अगला अभ्यास घुटने चालन क्रिया जिन्हें भी घुटने में सामान्य श्वास प्रश्वास के साथ थोड़ी देर बनी रहिए। यहाँ अभ्यास फेफड़ों का कार्यक्षमता को बढ़ाने पैरों को मिलाइए और धीरे धीरे श्वास को भरते हुए दोनों हाथों पर इस अवस्था में थोड़ी देर बने रहिए। यहाँ अभ्यास करने से सामान्य श्वास प्रश्वास पर बने रहिए। यहाँ अभ्यास बैक मसल को अगला अभ्यास
김정은 동지께서는 선물 받은 승용차의 성능을 높이 평가하시며 훌륭한 차를 선물로 받은 데 대하여 다시금 대통령 동지에게 사의를 표하시었습니다. 위한 중요 문제들에서 만족한 교내 일치로 설린 우호 관계를 두 나라 인민들의 지향과 영하셨습니다. 영국이 울리는 속에 경애하는 김정은 동지께서 울라지미로 비치 포친 동지를 네분들을 우러러 격정의 환호를 펼쳐 올렸습니다. 김정은 동지께서 기획들을 토의하셨습니다. 최고 수뇌분들께서는 워스터춘의 우주발사장에서 평양으로 이어진 뜻깊은 상봉과 회담
Kita